Today I'm going to be inking and coloring Sailor Saturn with Copic Markers. I love Sailor Moon because Sailor Moon is actually what got me into drawing as a kid. And Sailor Saturn was always a character I was drawn to because A, her color is purple, and purple has always been one of my very favorite colors. And B, because I always liked how quiet and different she was from the rest of the Sailor Scouts. So I've been really wanting to do a piece of fan art of her. Once I completed drawing this, I realized I wanted to color it with Copic Markers. But that's pretty much impossible with this sketchbook. The paper is way too thin. So I inked it, scanned it, and printed it out on cover stock paper from Staples. It's not the best paper, but it's what I had to work with. And it will work way better with markers than the thin sketch paper I did the initial drawing on. So this is where I scanned and transferred my line art to cover stock paper. If you want to see how I did it, see the description box for a link to my scan and transfer line art tutorial. Something I really liked about this sketch was there was lots of skin for me to color. I love shading skin, it's really fun. I started coloring by filling in the whole area of her skin with E000. I quickly realized that my marker was running out of ink. So there's a jump in the video that was actually me turning my camera off, refilling my marker, and then restarting my camera so I could resume coloring. I was frustrated at this because sometimes when you lay down Copic marker and let a section dry before you add more marker, it can be a lot harder to get everything to be uniform because there'll be like a line where the old marker has dried and the new marker has been laid down. Thinking back though, I didn't really need to be that frustrated. With Copics, I would have been coloring that surface area again anyway with shading, so it wouldn't matter if that happened. I had a challenge with this drawing where I wanted to slowly build the skin color up, but I was working within the limitations of my Staples cover stock paper. If you put too much marker on this paper, it'll eventually eat through the paper. It wasn't made for markers. One thing I did to try and prevent the marker from eating through the paper was I would wait 30 seconds or so to give marker opportunity to dry before I added to it. I'm not sure if this really saves the paper, but it really felt like it did. Plus I didn't experience any, paper being eaten through completely, so. I tried to use E34 quite sparingly because I really wanted there to be more gradual shadows, I guess. And I feel like if I added too much E34, it would create a much more harsh shadow than I was willing to deal with. I was pretty proud of how her tiara turned out. In the past, whenever I've drawn Sailor fan art, the tiaras just end up looking awful. I don't know what I did this time, but it actually seems pretty centered on her head and looks like she's wearing it rather than it just floating in front of her head. So that was a really big accomplishment for me. I used BV08 to start coloring her sailor outfit. It's more of a darkish purple-blue color, but it's all I had. I don't really have that many dark purples. And I wanted to differentiate between the light purple in her eyes and light purple I planned to put in her hair and her sailor outfit. It would look boring if I just used the same purple all throughout the drawing. Normally for lips, I like to use an R20 pink Copic marker, but my marker was actually out of ink and I was waiting for Amazon to send me a refill. I decided to try something new and use my pink rose Prismacolor marker. Sailor Saturn is supposed to have a dark red bow. I wanted to show the creases in her ribbon, but I didn't have a red darker than R89. I tried using G29 to draw on the folds and covered it all with R89. Unfortunately, the green still showed through much more than I wanted it to. In an attempt to fix things, I busted out my BV08 and decided that the worst thing that could happen was that I ruin it, right? And gasp, the BV08 purpley color, you know, a color that has red in it, did a wonderful job of blending the green and red tones. I don't think adding the green was a complete waste though, because I felt like the blending of all three colors did provide a nice, rich, shadowy look to the bow. This Prisma marker is neat because it has a pen tip that allows you to do really small details. I might think of trying to use it to create some line art one of these days. I used B60 to add shadows to the tops of her eyes because her eyelids would be casting a shadow. It wouldn't just be pure white. Because of the look of the drawing so far, I didn't want the hair shines to be super white. So I decided to go with a light purple instead. As I started laying down the dark tones, I realized I hadn't extended out the hair shine on the left far enough, so I just added it in as I went. I tried to avoid using black for her hair. I felt like it would be kind of a cop-out and like I was being lazy if I just filled it all in black. A lot of pieces that use black can look really cool, but for this particular one, I wanted to avoid black and challenge myself to give her really dark hair, even though I didn't have like a super black marker and I had a limitation of colors. It's really important to consider all the tools you have at your disposal and try not to write them off. Because the blue-purple marker I was using was pretty much the darkest marker I had, so I knew I would have to use layering to try and make her hair as dark as possible. When I first placed down the dark red, I was kind of startled at how much the red showed through, but once I layered the BV08 over it, I was so happy with how it looked. I loved the depth and shadow it created, and I loved how that color was so dark, but it wasn't just a boring black, and how there was a little bit more unity in my drawing with the bits of red shining through that matches the red on her bow. I would go back to the hair shines every so often to add another layer of the light purple just because I wanted the middle of the light purple to look a little brighter. I added some more shading to her lips and her bow once I'd finished her hair. I felt like I should try and add more shading to make them just a little bit more rich. Lastly, I took out my cool gray and added some shadows to her uniform and her earrings and her jewel. Those are white for Sailor Saturn, but I don't like to leave whites completely white. They need a little shadow, they need to look a little real, so I used cool gray. After I was done coloring and jelly rolling, I pulled out my Pilot Pocket brush pen and gave Sailor Saturn some eyelashes. I saved this step for last because I really wanted her eyelashes to be very black and attention-grabbing. I initially wondered if I should draw some pictures of Saturn behind her, kind of like a wallpaper print, but ended up deciding that that just wasn't suitable for this piece. She's not in a cutesy anime style, the colors are kind of dark and dramatic. She has a very neutral facial expression. I felt like cartoony Saturns just were not a suitable match. I felt like the addition of the yellow, though, made her pop up enough that I could live without having a very detailed background. And this is it. Thanks for watching, guys.